may have some forms of legislation, we may have some vehicles that have been established, forms of legislation like.
Hello and welcome everyone to the next episode of the AIM podcast, Simulated Reality, where we speak with leaders and decision makers in the ecosystem to learn their perspective around different trends and technologies of AI and data science. Today we have with us a very special guest. We have with us Nazareen Ebrahim. She is the founder and CEO at NAS Consulting International, and she is also the advisory board member at South African AI Association. Welcome, Nazareen. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Kashyap. I appreciate the time, and I'm very well. Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Great. Thank you so much. So we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, and I'm very excited to learn more. Right? We are going to talk about AI from a perspective of South Africa, and when we have a dialogue around AI, data science, or digital technologies, probably South Africa is a country which is, or even either other countries in the Africa are probably not the first one that might pop up in someone's head. While we were researching about the questions to do this, there is a lot happening, in fact, around AI and data science landscape in South Africa, as well as the overall broader continent of Africa, right? Uh, with that in mind, right, in the context of AI's global proliferation, and as South Africa kind of faces distinct challenges on its part to AI adoption, right? Uh, yeah, while every country has different perspectives on what their AI strategies or policies should be, what do you think are some of the challenges that South Africa is considering when overall considering the AI adoption?
Great question to begin with. When you talk about challenges with South Africa, I think for anyone globally, the first answer that comes to mind is the energy crisis that we have here. Alongside the energy crisis is also our unemployment crisis, which our unemployment rate is staggering at this point. The latest from the Stats South Africa reports show between, and I stand to be corrected, I think it's 30 and 40%. But and they fluctuate year on year with a number of parameters here that impact them, that ultimately come to the point which is, and someone made this comment recently at the launch of the Cape Town chapter of the South African AI Association, which was, we don't need to train for the sake of training. We need to train for an actual use case or an output. So have a project, train young people, put them on the project, let them work and output. That's the ideal opportunity, and that's what should happen in any case, in any project environment. But what seems or tends to happen here, the tendency is that there are many training programs with wonderful idealistic outputs around increasing skills, particularly technical skills in data science, cybersecurity analysts, and other key technical skills like that for the tech industry that are highly lacking in this economy. And saying that and the success marker there is, we've trained so many people, and so many people have a certificate, and they go out in the job market, and then what? So when we speak about the challenges, that paired with, I think, an understanding of how young people view their participation in the economy, but also the digital economy, is something we have to interrogate, I think, from all perspectives, whether it's a governmental perspective, private sector, civil society organizations, and at the education level, early childhood development. I would think across the board, and again, Kashyap, I'm speaking from the perspective not only as a player in the tech industry here, from an observer, analyst point of view, as well as understanding how our work can shape policy and regulatory environments, but also from the perspective of communications and a societal view. And that, I think, is an interesting one to know, is that we've got to have that ongoing conversation and open up people's minds to what we understand about our role here.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective from the answer that you have given, right? Apart from the kind of use cases that you are prioritizing, majority of the things that you said are some of the very much the AI problems or the or problems that the other AI ecosystems are facing, right? Talent, right? Talent
Yeah.
may being the major one. With that in mind, right, in the context of South Africa and considering the unemployment rate, uh, one of the challenges that AI is posing everyone, not just South Africa for that matter, is the kind of jobs that it is taking, right? And it's while uh, everybody was scared. I think everybody was very scared that AI will take over the jobs, but at the same time, everybody was soon after they started realize the kind of limitations that AI can bring over. I think they were a bit calmer, but with the kind of effort that the overall ecosystem or the entire AI world today is putting in reaching general intelligence, right? Artificial general intelligence. What does this mean in the context of South Africa, and how do you ensure that AI is developed in the country to ensure equitable, distribution of benefits from the technology?
So just to understand your question well enough, you're asking about what does the AI proliferation look like against jobs and its impact?
Correct,
Right.
correct. In the context of South Africa, because it is cycling. Because initially, what happened is it did not. People were scared that it will take out jobs, but they soon realized the limitations of the technology. But then again, now they're scared because of ChatGPT and the overall effort to
Yeah.
reach AGI, right? Artificial intelligence. So in that context, where does South Africa stand? What are some of the policies they're introducing to ensure equitable distribution of the benefits of the AI as a technology?
And again, we're going into an environment or a space. We're stepping in a space where things are uncertain. We may have some forms of legislation, we may have some vehicles that have been established, forms of legislation like the Cybersecurity Act, the Protection of Personal Information Act, and other legislation that gives insight into what potentially could happen around data privacy and technological enhancement or capability. Also, if we have to understand the regulatory framework around which that's built comes from the government wanting, and we hope to a great degree, wanting to protect citizens' rights and to allow them equal or fair participation in the digital economy. That's how we ultimately want to think of it, right? But in the perspective of how that looks for jobs, while the regulatory framework is uncertain at this point, because we all know, and this is a common thread across every AI ecosystem across the world, is that the regulation can't keep up enough with the output or the pace of the development that we have right now. So where does that put us? That puts us in the hands, firstly, of the private sector who have the funding and capability to continue building these type of tools for output with end users. They can come in the form from the finance industry, healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, etc., automotive. If we look at the South African context, our biggest industries here, the finance industry, of course, have led by example in using AI as a linking tool or a linking capability in order to improve customer service, to improve output for trends, to offer customers better products because they are able to predict trends, predict a hyper personalized view of a customer. We have seen that across our many large major banks here in South Africa. In the healthcare sector, we're starting to see output of apps like Caesar Health, which is an example of an app based here, which I know will be familiar to anyone in any AI ecosystem across the world, that uses a combination of telehealth, takes your data, links you to a doctor, understands what may be wrong with you in the first instance, combining the use of a chat bot, which is also, I think, for any user, the first step into interacting with what AI could look like for you as an end user when you're talking to a product or a platform. And then you delve deeper into that to have your services or your needs met when you're using a service provider. And again, let me pull that back into the question you asked me, which is around, we're just giving context there, but which is around, well, what does that look like for jobs? Well, the regulatory environment here can only go so far in trying to firstly gain an understanding of how much will this impact the end user. Part of that impact is around ethics, is around um, accepting that this tech is here, it's alive, it may do something, not understanding well enough how that tech may impact. And so the progression is slow there. On the other hand, we've got economic powerhouses in the form of private sector companies who can quickly have that output and are impacting all their customer base, whether we like it or not, from our banking apps, from the way we shop. If we're using something like a DoorDash, here in South Africa, we've got Checkers 6060. The Checkers 6060 app is probably one of the best examples of how um, a private national grocery chain was able to onboard so many users quickly enough with the tech that they were able to build, linking a number of drivers, linking the products that they had, starting to have a hyper personalized approach to how I wanted to shop as a shopper. I mean, I buy groceries on the Checker 6060 app, and it's become an invaluable part of my day, especially if I'm not around and I need to order groceries for my parents, as an example. So when we look at the impact then on jobs itself, given the context that we have, which we are no different from other countries around the world, the
Mhm.
concerns and the challenges are the same. But the difference appears in the level of digital education, citizen education that we have around our rights, our citizen rights in terms of a digital output, and what it means to own our data. It also is around how much of freedom do we have to participate in a digital economy, whether people have access to good internet, the mobile phones that they have, can they participate well enough? They can. We use this region, like I am sure in India, WhatsApp is a great use case for how people can participate in the digital economy at a great scale. So there are a number of
Mhm.
parameters to talk to. Of course, people are going to think that their jobs are going to be taken, but there is a slight, the ever so slight shift in the understanding that AI is not going to overtake jobs completely. Rather, you will need to work alongside these tools or these machines or thinkings or models or whatever.
So essentially, AI is going to do what it is going to do or what it is already doing. What we need to change is people's awareness about what it can do, which is the idea of data literacy or AI literacy, right? Is very well spoken about in India as well, and I'm sure that it is. What is what is so as a board member on what is on the council that is looking after AI in the country? What are some of the steps that South Africa is taking that other countries can take an example of so that this thing and uh, what are some of the things that are important to consider in this, right? So there might be set of a set of actions, but what are some of the immediate things that need to be considered in the near future that you are doing as a board of the council?
Thank you for that question. So, the South African AI Association's mandate is to promote the awareness of what artificial intelligence means for all publics, all citizens. And that is done through congregating a number of professionals in the AI industry, whether they're enthusiasts, commentators, writers, researchers, engineers, policymakers, and members of government, or whoever they may be. This is necessary for us here to do because the South African uh, example or case study so far has brought us to the stage where, yes, the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies has established a number of vehicles that may be an ideal opportunity to um, promote and give rise to AI programs in the country that combine all of the different sectors of society that we talked about. But has that happened yet? No, it has not happened yet. And at the launch of the Cape Town chapter that happened late last week on Thursday, the head of policy, who was on one of the panels, spoke of these initiatives, like the AI Institute that was launched last year. We had the Presidential Commission on the fourth report on the Fourth Industrial Revolution released sometime just after COVID had become a international pandemic, and we had a lockdown. There was a report that was released giving recommendations about South Africa's way forward to respond to 4IR and its impact and the requirement for people to move with it. Those recommendations are very much still recommendations. And what needs to happen now, and what was a great output from the conversations we had then. Remember too, we had this in the Western Cape, and one of the people who attended was the premier of the Western Cape. Now, for many people who are outside of our governing structures in South Africa, we have 9 provinces which make up the country, and the province of the Western Cape, or any province, is led by a political leader from a political party who has been voted in. He essentially acts as the head of the governing structure within that province. And that's the premier. So the premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, was present, and he delivered a short speech ahead of the panel discussions, which I moderated. His takeaway was around scenario planning using AI tools for better service delivery, which is an interesting one, right?
Okay.
Scenario
Yeah,
planning, and then from a premier's point of view, of course, service delivery is going to be number one with them. We have service delivery protests in South Africa almost on a daily basis. Now, there are a number of reasons for that, but it's a good place to start, especially from a digital governance point of view. And so the South African AI Association then, by having pulled that out, what would be great to see and what we'd hope to achieve in the next 6 months at least is to start channeling the thinking around AI's output on citizens by getting policymakers and members of parliament onto the right track, or steering them onto the right road of being equipped enough and educated enough on how to handle these matters. Because I think, Kashyap, we both can agree across the world, you can sit in any parliament, and it would be nice to have parliamentarians there or MPs with a much better understanding of the technologies and their use cases and their capabilities, and also the impacting technologies that give it, permanence or force. So if you look at AI,
yeah,
AI as an
yeah,
example, you would need a form of cloud tech. You would need data training. You would need certain kind of engineers. There's so many um, depending factors or dependencies on them. So it would be nice for them to have a great understanding. And that leads me to then a national AI conversation, which New Zealand did very successfully in, I think, 2019, 2020, with the New Zealand government and coordinating with the World Economic Forum. So, that's a first step to us. It's empowering people in legislature, MPs. It's starting a national AI conversation. And in that role is also bringing together people who are already impacting the ecosystem, from VCs to private sector companies, and to people working in this space.
yeah. No, I think the overall dialogue needs to be very top down, which I very much agree. Though uh, we as a we as a community need to understand the technology better and its impacts better, and the innovation at which the rapid pace at which the innovation is happening, especially in this space, and the uncertainties that lie around it, means that we need to have a healthy dialogue between different stakeholders, and this should percolate down to everyone understanding the implications of what this technology means to them, what their livelihood, their future, etc. And I think some of the initiatives that you just mentioned are well worthy of, probably I'm going to go back and read a little bit more on them. But that's something that is, I'm hoping in the right direction in a lot of ways. I just wanted to kind of revisit on the point that we talked about in the second question in terms of the availability of talent. The availability of talent, or the talent crunch, was heavy, especially post-pandemic. It is what I see in India, right? But with that in mind, right, if we have to enable sustainable growth of AI technologies, uh, and build the talent around it and foster a culture of innovation, responsible innovation, what are some of the steps that South Africa is taking in this? I'm sure that there are in India. I've seen there is a lot of new courses that have been introduced at the bachelor's, like the undergraduate level. What are some of the steps that are happening in South Africa to build the talent around this?
Yeah, and those steps are being taken in different spaces, particularly academia, and to some degree, or I should say to a great degree, global tech company's presence here in South Africa by offering programs that um, capacitate digital literacy and digital learning. So in those two ways, we've seen an influx of learning and development and partnerships. In addition to understanding that we have some sense of a VC landscape here. Knife Capital comes to mind. They are an interesting one who went into a Series B round of funding so that they can fund new ventures here, and they fund in a specific manner. But in addition to that, to capacitate skills here, it's interesting to note that one, if we look at universities, the University of Johannesburg, it was really great back in 2020, perhaps 2019. It might have been 2019 when I first heard about this through the work I was doing, that they had introduced a mandatory AI beginners course for every student who joined at the university. It was just a module, but it was a way of getting people to understand what the technology meant and the impact. In the various university spaces as well, there are incubators or research, the R&D departments, of course. They have an opportunity to test the technology. I know Wits University, there's a gentleman who is testing a particular model. I'm just trying to get his name now, and I can't remember it for the life of me, but I will mention it as soon as I do. And University of Pretoria is another one. The University of Tshwane University of Technology was also co-host in the first and official launch of the South African AI Association. They have come on board as a key player. Also, as part of the association, Google South Africa has come on board, which was a key indicator to us of what it would look like for us to develop a national AI conversation with the right players. And so when you look at the academia part, University of Cape Town, the University of Stellenbosch, many of them have programs and research areas that are going on in terms of the impact of responsible AI on citizens through various lenses, whether it's from a work perspective, healthcare, whatever it might be. The second part of that is private sector. And private sector, Salesforce made an announcement when they came here recently with their global roadshow. They announced introducing courses at university level for their enterprise platform. So students could be onboarded almost immediately. If you're going to go into the marketplace, Kashyap, if I went into the marketplace now, right, and I work primarily in the digital space, at least I should have, the very least I should have an understanding of course, how to do emails, how to browse, how to research online. But I should also know some key core tools like Canva or the Google suite of tools or Microsoft suite of tools, right? As an example, I should be able to articulate myself in those spaces or use them for some output, a very basic output even. The way that we learn and the places that we need to learn in have changed fundamentally over the last century. So even the conversation around early childhood development and how kids are onboarded early enough through reading, writing, and understanding their place. Because you don't, and I'm sure you come from a development background, but correct me if I'm wrong here. These days, the third-party tools with many code sets available means you don't have to be a developer. So what happens to the actual development capability? And we have to start thinking very quickly about how our kids learn and what the future of work will look like for them. So the question you asked around the output share for skills development, there is movement. There is a great interest in how people are capacitated, whether that's channeled well enough into actual output for people to get work, for them to have sustainability is another question. And it's where we are having the challenge at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's one step at a time, right? I mean, as long as there is a realization, and I think all countries are very much at the forefront of realizing the significance of what AI and its implications overall. As steps, one of the big one of the points that you made when you were talking about skill development was the role of big tech, right? Some of the names you took, Google, Tableau, Salesforce, are coming, and they are investing in the countries in South Africa. Uh, what is their role, do you think, and what should, as a person who comes from South Africa, what do you think their role should be? What do you think their role should not be in terms of enabling AI ecosystems and leveraging AI for the overall betterment of the society? So that's something that I would like to learn.
I so I would like to pair my professional answer with a personal opinion about just understanding the landscape, and that would be that global tech organizations have at their heart always a tech for good approach. They want to empower and enable citizens all over the world. They want to do that in multiple ways, and ultimately, offering that kind of service, core service and skill, is going to grow their database of customers, right, and give them access to um, data sets that previously they would not have had access to, in a way that they have sponsored it for themselves. So the one thing that we have to be very certain about, and this is mindful of the way developed nations come to developing nations to give them funding and to say, I'm giving you a certain amount of money. We run these programs in your countries, but there's always a funder's agenda behind that. And so I would be, I'm always mindful of the funder's agenda that's behind these elements around the lobbying power that these tech organizations could potentially have around the regulatory environment here to serve them more than it would serve their end user. So that for me is an interesting point to think about, to throw out as a point for consideration. And the second would be the rights of the digital user. Now, we all know of the many conflicts and what word could I use here, because my words are just evading me today. But the many troubles that many of the global tech corporations have faced around data privacy, the rights of people, the ethics around their platforms. We have heard many times of Facebook being fined. Google has its own long history with trust and safety around AI and the people that it had fired, particularly a lady named Timnit Gebru. There are many
Yeah.
people in that space who talk about the harmful impacts. The other dark side of that is the work opportunities or the training opportunities that they may pose here may ultimately not be what we want. There was an interesting report, I think, in The Economist, if I'm not mistaken, which I read recently, around a human, and this was for Amazon Web Services, if I'm not mistaken. It was around the moderation services that the global tech corporations offer in terms of providing as safe service as possible. And the gentleman who spoke there, because he was so traumatized by it, was left with severe depression. Many are driven to suicidal attempts because of the amount of content that they have to take in and try to figure out whether it's safe or not for human consumption. They're also paid very little, and this work is being channeled to the African continent. So I'm mindful of the agenda, the funders' agenda that the global tech corporations come here with that may be, um, um, wrapped in a very shiny foil of idealistic, altruistic purposes. We've got to be mindful of that. Another good thing, and just to end this point, Kashyap, is that I'm thinking of is this term called long-termism, which is doing the rounds in news and media outlets around billionaires who have this very idealistic concept of what the future looks like, but only for a few people. And what would that future be? And everything's put into the perspective of we've got to do right. We have to stop the development of AI for the next 6 months. Let's sign a letter. I know Sam Altman and Elon Musk put their voices to that letter a few months ago. What would that look like? So again, we must be mindful that we live in a world that we have to be aware of constantly changing geopolitical relations, blocks or groups of countries who have friendly relations and want to build their own economic zones. but have to be mindful also of the act of colonialism and what that's done for everyone. And colonialism, whether it's post-colonial or whatever it might be, comes in varying forms. It's not just political colonialism that everyone has faced.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, and I've read a lot around the geopolitics of AI and overall emerging technologies, and I think it's a very I think you put all the points very succinctly in terms of kind of the benefits that you know. I think personally, it's important the role that the big tech is playing in terms of like modernizing technology, modernizing, or let me say, putting in money or investing money to kind of modernize the technology's role in every individual or societies rather. Uh, it can be beneficial in a lot of ways. Technology can solve a lot of issues as well. But at the same time, it needs to. My personal belief is that it needs to be done with a lot of consultation with organizations like the ones that you work for, and together, I think there needs to be a solution built for many ways.
Hmm.
My final question to you is, so what next? What is next for, if we can slightly move further from South Africa as well, in the broader context of Africa with so many countries, so many cultures. One of the things that we have always discussed as a part of AI is the lack of available data and uh, the lack of digitization in some of the countries, and because of which the AI that is built can have severe repercussions on these, right? So, in a broader context, where do you think and how do you think should South Africa and its neighboring countries or the continent of Africa should proceed? Or maybe you can help me understand in the next year, next 5 years, and the next 10, 15 years, right? What lies for South Africa and the other nations?
I would need a crystal ball, which I don't have with me right now. I'm going to order one on Amazon. But in all seriousness and in all fairness, um, if this must be a line that has been used in multiple interviews, if COVID has taught us anything, is the unpredictability of what the future may hold. However, that's not what an actuarial scientist or anyone working in the insurance business would tell you, is that they need to predict trends anyway. And if AI is anything to go by with the way it predicts, has the level of capability for prediction, what do we know for sure? We know for sure right now that can give us some sense of the way forward is that we are at the cusp, the final cusp of getting ourselves ready, our AI level of readiness for digital economy wellness. We're at the final cusp of getting there and getting ready. Should we miss the boat, we're going to be very far behind as an economy. We have the vehicle in place, various mechanisms in place to enable a national AI conversation. There are outputs of training opportunities that need to be rightly placed for better opportunities for young people who are being trained here. If you look at the rest of the African continent, um, the recent coup in Gabon that was against the president rather than an approach or a response to France still having a colonial presence there. Remember, France has faced 4 coups in the last couple of months, in the last duration of period, which is really a geopolitical story about African countries or economies trying to reclaim their place, with young Africans wanting to take a stand. There are, in other parts of the African continent, a concerted effort to establish an AI authority, at least an AI understanding, a national AI understanding. Egypt, Tunisia, Rwanda, Nigeria are countries that come to mind in various capacities, whether they have a national AI policy, a national AI strategy, a unit for AI, following along with their neighbors in the UAE and the Middle East, which is also, I think, impacting them because of the region specifics. The the capabilities are there, but as we grow as an African continent, our new place in the world, South Africa may have a number of opportunities that give us a privileged advantage, so to speak, being a country that's always looked at as an economic powerhouse, if leading the race. Um, I'm not sure how other African brothers and sisters are going to respond to that at this stage. But if you look at I want to go back to this again, the BRICS bloc, which has grown to 11 members now. Times are uncertain and times are changing. Africa is poised to assert its role as a continent that doesn't need handouts anymore. And if that's going to be filtered down into the tech environment, certainly there have been movements, especially in South Africa, around funding, massive funding opportunities that flowed into the country, but into private companies that have shown capability for growth. One of them being, I think it's Carry, it's a gaming company in Cape Town that managed to secure funding even from Andreessen Horowitz. If we look at those movements, it means that in a year to 2 years from now, who knows but the capability of the African continent to dictate AI movement, growth, skills, partnership, particularly from an Africa Free Trade Agreement point of view, Africa Union point of view, ECOWAS, the SADC region, the SADC nations. We go across the continent. We've got 54 countries here. Not everyone may have equal opportunity or equitable outcomes in terms of what AI looks like for them, but certainly if the geopolitical narrative is anything to go by, then Africa is busy asserting itself as a powerhouse to be reckoned with. And we will see that movement over the next 2 years.
Fantastic. On that note, thank you so much, Nazareen, for your time. The conversation was extremely insightful. As I mentioned at the start of the conversation, if you think about AI or emerging technologies, South Africa might not be the first country that comes to your mind, but it is very important for us to learn some of uh, the phases at which different countries lie, what different countries need, what are their perspectives, and here's to hoping that overall uh, as a society, AI does not bring the end of us and a bright future, a bright
Let's
inclusive
hope
future.
humanity prevails.
Sorry?
Let's hope humanity prevails.
Yes,
If
it will. I think it all. Yeah. Let's hope for the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks, Kashyap.